Hey everyone, so this is going to be the 32nd Singapore Open and just starting off the first round playing as black. So let's start off the game with the usual e6. Okay, opponent is playing diagonal. I'll just jump into the center and regroup. Okay, okay, over here maybe we'll play something unconventional today. Let's go with the rocket opening. So today will be just five people in this Singapore Open, probably due to a schedule clash. And basically, there are five participants, and we'll be playing 4 rounds each, more of a round robin. So now opponent has played this, cut across. So this working on this longest edge, which is a four-disc edge. Let's try to cut through it. With these three squares in mind, if I jump into the center, if he cuts out here, I'll be able to occupy the center again. So let me go with that position. Okay, so opponent has chosen to cut out to the center. So we'll just squeeze in, flipping two discs in a single direction. Just trying to cut back into the center and maintain that shape cross. So usually in the opening stages, when you try to vary your game, it's not so critical in terms of too much position. But when you go into the mid game, it's important to actually just follow through with the concept. So over here, I'll be adopting this. So the longest edge over here, the longest row of this is this one on row 4, and the longest column of this over here is on the F column. So usually we look to penetrate the longest edge, or we just stick to the tail end of it. So this one is more attractive at f7 than c3 because I'm looking to regroup these two groups. So let's just jump into the tail end of that. And if he does take something like f8, I'll be able to regroup to g6. Okay, so right now he's blocked g6, so that's quite a good move by Numcat. So I'll be playing over here to the edge to control this mini diagonal and at the same time to look for consecutive tempo. So I'll just penetrate through this way, try to go for a consecutive h5 after the h6 move, or maybe even form a pair to h3 if he doesn't cover this spot. So let's see, if he goes to the bottom or to the left without removing the e6 disc, I would then be able to form a nice pair and push the tempo over to him to play on the outside while forming a very nice pair on the inside without really creating more moves for my opponent. So right now, after playing h6, I'm threatening to form a pair. Okay, so he's rightly blocked that. So since he's blocked that, I might consider going for h5. But if I play h5, he has an immediate response to h4 because he has this disc at e7. So what I want to do is perhaps to try to get consecutive moves there. So maybe I can consider f8, remove this, and sort of threaten to go for consecutive moves. But on the flip side, he can easily prevent that from happening by playing to d8. So maybe f8, d8, e8, feed off the unbalanced edge. That's possible as well. So let's go with f8 first. Okay, so he's jumped right through over here. So if I were to take this move, it would be 2 poison and probably give him an open move over here. If I were to just cross over, he would just cross as well. So that is a problem as well. So one way is maybe I can cut out here, try to gain one or two discs along this row so that I can try to go for consecutive moves. That is possible as well. Yeah, maybe let's just go for the quick touch and go on just penetrating this entire long 5 disc row and at the same time at the end of this consecutive row. So let's see whether that makes sense. He's probably going to just cut back into the center, which is anticipated. Then maybe I'll jump for a nice d3, expecting e3 in response, and then maybe I can go to c3, or I could make the consecutive moves maneuver to h5 and h4. So basically, my objective right now is just to try to get both consecutive moves to the right. That would gain me a lot of tempo without probably using too many moves on the left or creating too many moves for him. So right now, the problem of d3 is that I give up a quiet d7 in response by him. That may not be something that I want, perhaps. Okay, so maybe it could work because if he does take a quiet d7, I'll be able to take h5 and go for two consecutive moves. So let's go with d3. So again, if white goes to e7, I'll be able to cut to h5 and probably go for a consecutive h6 thereafter. Maybe d7, h5, and then he plays to e8 and threaten for h4, and then I'll jump into h4 and he'll cover it. Then maybe I'll go on to play b5. So let's see how that goes. Shouldn't be too difficult a move to derive for e7. Okay, so he does go for the e7 move. Yeah, so let's go for h5, a quick response, controlling this mini diagonal temporarily. And of course, if he chases after it, I could also choose to prevent it by just covering back to d8 and flipping this e7 disc back to black. Which is also possible, I guess, instead of just taking one move over here that flips off the f4 disc and removes my e3 move. Instead of that, maybe I'll just continue on to prevent it. I'll just prevent it this way so that I can try to gain both moves if possible. So let's see how he responds here. If he goes for c7, I'll go for e3 first, and then he might follow with c8. And then I could probably jump into h4, potentially, or I could just grab the h first. Yeah, because there isn't any disc along this mini diagonal leading from d3 all the way to g6. So even if I played this would be a quiet move for him. So that wouldn't really make sense for me to play. So instead of that, I should in fact actually grab the edge. So I'll just grab the edge, continue this control on this mini diagonal from d8 all the way up to the g5 disc and leading up to the pocket h4. So if I have this exclusive access, it would be somewhat advantageous for me to control and at the same time protecting this unbalanced edge below, in a sense that my opponent cannot play the c-square move to try to feed off the corner and wedge, because if he plays the c-square move, I'll be able to wedge in between first. So let's see. It's a fair move, a diagonal cut, minimal impact on this outside. So right now I'll go for this move, basically poisoning the b5 move and also poisoning his c3 move. So logically speaking, he would probably go to either of d2 or e2 over here. So e2 gives me an easy response to d2 and protects this mini diagonal, and he has to think of another move. So I would personally think that he should probably go for d2. But if he goes for d2, I guess my response would be to just jump into the center within the last box of the Sweet 16. So I would go for c3 and still maintain that general centralized approach between these safe squares to the top and the safe squares to the left. So just somewhat sandwich in between. Okay, so he does go for e2. So in fact, I'll go for the easy d2 in response with this temporary diagonal control, this mini diagonal line between c5 and e3. So these two pockets of spaces are critical. So if I were him, I would probably just jump right into c3 perhaps. Okay, so he doesn't play c3, he plays a4. So he's trying to split the disc into two groups, but it's very easily regrouped for me here perhaps to c3. So I'll just continue maintaining that control, and he would be probably looking to play maybe d1 to split up the disc again to two different groups. so that he can access to f2 in the future, and also to the bottom left and also to the top left, I guess. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so right now he's played b5, establish c5, chasing after access to f2. So prevention would mean maybe this move to a3, temporary prevention maybe to b6, which is also possible, or just simply blocking the move. Poisoning the move doesn't seem likely. Ignoring the move would probably mean this. So c2, and letting him have f2, and then I would follow up maybe over to the top. So looking at the situation over here, it seems fine to actually just play the simple nice b6 prevention move. So I'll go ahead with b6, prevent that first, and basically make it an odd shape for him to play, or to try to gain access back into f2. So if he does play to the top, say d1, I'll be able to just play to c2, a very nice centralizing move. Just continue to control this passive mini diagonal over here, and at the same time trying to basically run him out of moves along this front, and also this diagonal line over here. So usually in Othello, when you go from the opening to the mid game and all the way to the end game, things change, or the important things to focus on would then probably change. So in the mid game, it's probably more wrestling about line controls. So let's go for that easy cut to disc surrounded by all the existing discs, and then basically force him to grab the edge. Perhaps if he grabs the edge, this becomes clear. I would be able to play a nice a5, but he doesn't. So let's see. Right now, this move establishes b6, chases the excess towards f2, and at the same time, he has one move over here to play a nice c1 move. So two options here. One, I could deal with this move, which means prevention would be something like this, removing the b6 disc. But this gives him another move to a3 and re-establish that excess, so it's not really preventable. So poisoning it would probably mean f1, and blocking it would probably mean a move that is way too loud because he has a nice quiet move in response over here. So if I wanted to deal with this move, there's no way I can prevent this because I can't remove this two white discs at the same time. Blocking it would mean taking the move over here. Poisoning it, unlikely. So combining the thought of blocking this move and also poisoning this move, so probably thinking one of these two choices. So it's either c1 or f1. So f1, and if you play c1, I'll be able to jump to f2. If f1, he goes to e1, which basically poisons and gives up the edge. I'll grab the edge. He takes this. He'll have a full control of the this mini diagonal. Black, white, black. White across controls this entire mini diagonal. I'll be able to cut back over here by playing a nice a3 perhaps, and gain back this so that I can access to this square. That is possible. So just trying to read a little bit further ahead. If I were to play black over here, three response actually. Three options that he might have is to just take this, let me have the unbalanced edge, and I'll progress further. I don't think that's likely. If I play to c1, it's more likely that he plays to e1, feeds this, and then controls this mini diagonal. So the resultant shape is probably more or less the same, but c1 seems to give more options for my opponent at this point in time. So and also f1 provides an opportunity for my opponent to make a mistake to play c1 perhaps. So let's go with f1. So something that I perhaps didn't consider about f1 is that if white takes e1, white essentially controls this main diagonal as well, which I probably would have some difficulty accessing. So white, black, white might become a problem for me afterwards. So white, black, black over here might potentially be an issue if I cannot access this main diagonal. So now looking back, it does seem that maybe f1 is slightly flawed, opens up an opportunity for opponent to control the lead diagonal way too much. Uh, Probably c1 would have been the better choice. Okay, so opponent has played to f2, which was also probably slightly unexpected for this move to happen. Um, so maybe white, black over here, white response, I can go for a diagonal control potentially. That would be an option as well. Or black, white, and then essentially I might be stuck. Another option is to play h4 first, while this diagonal is still controlled by myself, black, because black, white, there is no flip of this along this diagonal, so that essentially makes this an unattackable unbalanced. So that is possible as well. But I think it's unlikely that we want to touch square that we have total exclusive access instead of handling the active region to the top, where I still have two discs that might provide moves for him. So black, white, black might be a possible option. So I think black over here to see one still gives cleaner options for myself, so I'll go with that first. If white jumps into the center, I'll be able to play maybe an extreme diagonal control. It's generally not very advisable to allow your opponent to occupy the center, but for the purpose of tempo and eliminating moves, perhaps that would be the way to go. If white goes for b1, then I'll probably control this mini diagonal along b4 to d2 by playing the a3 move, flipping one disc over here in a horizontal direction and these three discs in a diagonal direction. So probably this might have been alright, I guess, to form that mini diagonal control. And if he does go in for the center, I'll go for the main diagonal control. Not too sure whether that would work out. Okay, so he's gone for b1. So let's go for this move over here for the diagonal control, this mini diagonal. So I think most players tend to focus too much on the lead diagonal and tend to probably overlook the mini diagonals. And of course, mini diagonals for advanced players might be a weakness as well because they tend not to focus that much on it. So this is probably one way to look at it as well. So right now it does seem a bit more challenging for white already. Um, yeah, so basically the purpose of controlling this access is to try to create these exclusive regions where I have total control of. So if white wanted to jump into C square over here and try to feed off the corner to trade corners, then I'll be able to sandwich over here. So it is a fair move by him, but right now, if I were to jump in, he might go in here. I might lose parity. So if I go in and he jumps in, I'll grab this. He'll go down, and I'll grab the parity. So it might actually be better to take the corner now instead of just to sandwich for the sake of sandwiching in the middle and make him play a wedge move over here. So I'll go with the corner, and he'll probably go for the wedge. And I'll jump in. He will take the corner, chase after the success. I'll block this pocket. And then in terms of the number of moves, I think it's probably going to work in my favor in this case. So now that he's played this move to b7 and cleared off the b6 disc, the c7 disc, I'll be able to jump in over here, feed off the unbalanced edge. I can slot in behind, go for the corner. Or if he goes for this, right, I would then go for the corner. He would pocket this. I'll block this. So one of the threat right now is this losing this entire row, because if I were to play e1, I would actually essentially be flipping this disc as well. So another possible move is probably here. Let's play G1. G1 basically delays that effect, and I wouldn't surrender this entire row to him. But it's probably a little risky, perhaps, if white goes here. But in terms of parity, I still have one square to the bottom left. So even if he does do something like this or this, it's fine, I guess. Let's go for the corner, allow him to wedge. I'll grab this, and then he'll probably get the corner, and I'll take the entire row. Hopefully no issues for parity. Grab this, grabs the corner, spare, I'll grab the last two moves. So good game. So that is the end of round 1. So this is going to be round 2 of the 32nd Singapore Open, playing as white against Chris Max Hart. So yeah, let's see how this game goes. So Chris Max Hart basically plays a very interesting game against white perpendicular in terms of playing Bagat. So probably let's try to avoid that and play a diagonal opening perhaps. So for diagonal opening, let's see what variation he plays. Okay, so this is Raccoon Dog or Rotated Raccoon Dog, which also tends to lead to tricky lines. So let's just cut into the center. Take one disc for the first couple of moves, maybe just regroup to the center as much as possible. Over here, this might be an option to cut across, control this mini diagonal here and this mini diagonal, almost like a checkerboard kind of situation. Or I could just jump in over here immediately. But if I play this, I would have the opportunity to potentially play two moves, white and white, in the future. But white-black prevention. So let's try to go for 2 consecutive tempo. So he might prevent it by playing to c4 over here. If he does play c4, then I guess I'll jump into the center at d7. Okay, so he doesn't. Okay, so one concern right now is if I were to just jump in to the center, right now he's controlling this mini diagonal, so the only way that I can actually just jump into the center would be f4. If I play f4, there is a chance that he sweeps the entire row or column of this downwards using f7. So that is a slight concern there in terms of the control. White, black, and white, he will be able to cut into the center as well. So probably just looking a little bit more ahead, I should probably play f7 first, since I'm the only one who can access f4 at this point in time. So I'll just reserve f4 perhaps. So let's go to f7 and hold. So right now he's jumped into the center with d7, which is a fair move, I guess. So just evaluating either f4 right now. If I were to jump into f4, where would he play? I think right now might be fine because he no longer has that f7. If he plays f8, it's too loud, and I'll have a free g6. So based on my assessment, I guess right now returning to f4 seems fine because I control this entire row. Okay, so he's chipped off to the left, capturing d6, which provides access over here to a nice g3 for him. So let's apply the basic mid-game principles over here. Prevention means removing this disc. All of the moves that removes that disc seems too loud at b6 or maybe even d7. Blocking the move seems way too loud because it removes this g4 disc that gives him a very easy quiet move over here. So poisoning the move, not likely to happen. Working around it might mean playing h3 that allows him to just jump right into the pocket, but h3 again removes g4 and gives him a quiet um, c4. So that's probably not what I want to do. Instead, I probably want to go to maybe to the bottom, e8, and allow him to just take that move. If he takes it, I'll probably jump in. Since I've removed this disc first, there's no way he can take a quiet b4 perhaps. Or alternatively, I could just jump in over here and then poison this move continuation to c4. And he goes right in over here to g3. And if I were to take h4, he would still have a quiet c4. So just weighing that and taking those into consideration, probably top choice would be e8 or even c8 potentially, but c8 and e8 then makes a difficult position for me to try to control the edge to the bottom. So let's go with e8. Okay, opponent has taken a quick g3, cutting into the center. That's a fair move. I have two options here. Either I play to f2 immediately or h4. So both moves specifically, the intention is to actually remove the f4 disc, which provides key diagonal cuts across to both ends, to the top and also to the right for black. So just looking to see whether I should play this or this. So I slightly favor f2 because f2 this seems more removable. f2 and h4 poisons one another, but it's more likely the case that f2 will be removed in the future as the game progresses, solely based on the fact of how the shape is currently oriented, because if white plays here, black goes to the right, I'll be able to play a few moves here and then force black to the top and remove this move. If I were to play here, it's probably more risky. Also, this move is on the second parameter and this move is on the third parameter. So let's go with the move on the second parameter perhaps. Let's go with that. See whether that makes sense. So there is also a chance that he just takes something like g6, form a plane to the right, almost like a second parameter plane that basically poisons me on the right. So whichever move I play towards the right, it's badly poisoned. So that is one option for him. Other potential options is maybe h5 and approach to capture the right edge progressively. Okay, so h5 is played. So right now, two options, h6 or g6. h6 is better than g6 because it doesn't give him a straightforward edge play, I guess, but white, black. Then white would play a quiet move, black would jump down towards the bottom. White feeds off the edge to the right. All of the moves to the top might be poisoned. And then probably play c8 for a quiet pocket move. That is likely. Yep. Let's go with this option. To the right. So the chances are is he's probably not gonna grab this h7 move that I've just feed him, because if he does that, I'll just simply play an easy move to the pocket space at g6, control this mini diagonal, and he'll be forced to make a move outside. So definitely he has to play g6. And if he plays g6 over here, I'll probably play the quiet move to the top right at h3, which he would have to respond to h7 then to avoid losing off tempo, and probably I can play a quiet gap, one square gap to c8. Okay, so you just jump into the center. That's a fair move, so I'll play a quiet move, a b square swindle to h3, and he does in fact take the unbalanced h right now. So if I were to take c8 right now, there is a danger that he controls the mini diagonal over here between e7 and also g5. So that is probably something I don't want happening. So I'm just going to feed off that unbalanced h first and force him to play it. And at the same time, I control some disc along this mini diagonal to avoid that situation. And then I basically play a quiet move down here. So now the danger is probably if he plays d8. So he does play d8, in fact. That's a very good move, actually. So now most of my moves look fairly poisoned, except for c7, which was the anticipated or intended response. So I'll just go with c7, which is a quiet move, flipping two discs, somewhat surrounded by the existing disc. But it gives up an easy b6 response for him as well. So if he goes to b6, I'll go to b5, which is a pocket move while controlling this diagonal leading up to the edge. So at least I don't give him an easy move to the edge, perhaps. And at the same time, once he's played b6, perhaps the e1 move doesn't seem to be as quiet right now. If e1, f1, and if he plays g1, this is entirely poisoned because of that disc created at b6. So that might be an opportunity for myself. So weighing between these two moves right now, if I were to play c4, then d3 would remain poisoned for him. If I were to play d4, I almost form a nice cave or a shell to the left and allow him to just jump in for an easy c4. So I would probably go with c4 right now. And he doesn't have a direct access over here to b3. So there's a high chance that he's just going to go for a5, which is a more reasonable move. And if he does go for a5, I'll probably take the diagonal cut across to a3. Seems like a fair move to play at this point in time. So a3, and let's anticipate his next move. Probably d2 might be my top pick for him. Yep, so he does play d2, so that's correct. That's a fair move to play. So right now, just comparing between these two moves, which makes sense. If I play this would give him a very nice quiet move to the top. So I should play towards the center, nearer to the center 16. So let's go with that approach. And at the same time, if you were to play maybe something as loud as e2, I'll have some quiet moves to the left. And if you just play c2, I'll have e2 in exchange. So far it looks fine. Just bearing in mind of time and just being a little bit more conscious of that, hopefully I can try to look slightly ahead towards the end game. So passively, or just by default, the bottom right is a 4 square region. So that's probably not a region that I would want to consider any moves at all, because given that it's an even region, I don't want to start there for the sake of preserving parity. So I don't even need to look at the bottom right, at least not for now. So right now he's jumped in for quiet move. I mean, quite a loud move actually. But at the same time, he swept up this control of the column over here. So there is a potential danger of him doing an extreme diagonal control down to b7. So since he's flipped some discs along this diagonal, let's go for head and tail. Just going on the tail end of this diagonal direction that he's flipped, and then letting him take the center. That's all right. To prevent him from making the diagonal control, he flips this. This diagonal is clean, so I'll go for a quiet move here. Cut for this disc and try to nestle some disc in between to prevent diagonal control from happening. And then basically controlling this mini diagonal as well. So if he takes this d1, I'll be able to just follow to c1, c2, right down to b1, and then he would probably have to feed off the balance edge. He doesn't have diagonal control on both lead diagonals, so that's a relief for me at this point in time. So the right edge, given that it's a full solid 6 disc edge, it's somewhat of a double edged sword. It's either a huge win for him or a huge win for me, depending on who gets to control the corner access. So let's just try to look further ahead. I think no issues considering considering that the top left is actually a 5 disc square space. We're just going to go there and make it 4, so it will be a parity region, and at the same time establishing the D3 disc that targets access to F1. So right now I think he doesn't have much of an option, perhaps, and the game would probably close easily with parity. Okay, so he's taken F1, so I'll just respond with the defensive G1. So I think that maneuver earlier just to establish this nestled disc to E4 has paid off. So wherever he plays, I'll just follow in terms of parity. So that should be fine. Okay, so he plays starting with B2. So I'll just grab the A1 corner. So just keeping in mind that he doesn't have control of this mini diagonal. So if he does, if this 2 discs were black, then it would be a concern and I wouldn't be able to access A2 in response to that move. So he's cleverly played this sequence first and cleared off this lead diagonal. So that is actually a very smart maneuver by Chris Maxhart. So right now there is a danger of being swindled, but I think that should be enough discs. So I'll just play the sweep down vertical because I want to control this mini diagonal that still has a remaining pocket. So in the end game, usually you try to maximize your discs as much as possible. So let's go with this. There is a danger that he feeds off a swindle over here as well. But if he chooses to feed that forced swindle, it would mean that he's giving up this lead diagonal. At the same time, he's giving up these 2 main columns, the G and the H columns. So I think even if I were to get swindled, I would still have enough discs. So that's fine. So if he does take the corner, then it will be black, white, black, white, black, white, black, and then finally white. I would probably still have enough discs, but I think the better option for him is to not do the forced swindle, I guess. So I think corner should be better for him, perhaps. At least he secures the bottom and the right edge. So I believe he's probably counting, taking some time to count through the sequences. So it's definitely good practice to actually do the counting just to tell the difference. Even if you're losing, every disc would count. I think there might be a potential opportunity for black to actually play G7. I mean G8. G8, F8, followed by G2 might be a problem for me. White, black, white, black, black. Okay, so he does play that move, which is a very impressive sequence actually. So that is probably gonna be a little bit trouble Little bit of trouble for me right now. Let's see. I think that is a fantastic sequence. Maximizing the disk and also tempo of the swindle. So for this case, I guess I would have to count for sure. 33 minus 330 plus 6 on this end plus 6 on this end. That will be plus 12. So that's 42. 42, I lose 2 disks over here. That would mean 40, and then I would lose another 9 disks. So actually, I might lose by 33, 31 on that count. Okay. Seems like there is no difference unless I avoid the swindle. If not, but there doesn't seem any option to avoid that swindle. So let's see, 37. 37 minus 2, 35. Doesn't seem to have any difference. 43, 40, 40 minus 9 is still 31. So seems like a loss for me either way at this point in time. Can't really figure out a better sequence. What if I played this move? Probably not too great either. 37, 33, 32, 29, 31. Seems like plus 2 for him either way. No, okay, I counted wrongly, so it was a draw. Nice G7, G8, fine. So good game, Samuel. Okay, so this is gonna be round 3 of the 32nd Singapore Open, playing as white now against Yan, promising young player of Singapore. Let's go with the perpendicular opening. Earlier in round 2, I suffered a little bit of a surprise draw by playing diagonal perhaps. So let's play the usual perpendicular to see whether we can stabilize that game. Okay, so opponent is playing the usual, maybe Tiger to Stephenson or Tiger to Rosebill variation. So over here we can just play the usual book sequence and see which variation he would like to lead into. Okay, opponent is playing Stephenson, so I'll go for the no Kong sequence, just as a variation instead of the usual calm off. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so he plays the usual book, jump into the center sequence. I'll play something off book just to jump into the center. This is not the best move, not the best book move at least. But let's go for a variation to c5. Okay, opponent has played down. So right now he's controlling this mini diagonal, so that's a nice control for him. I'll just jump into the center and regroup for a simple approach. Okay, so opponent has regrouped. So forming almost like a cup shape. So over here, this is slightly on the longer end for my overall shape. So I have one extra disc over here. So comparing to break to the left or to the right, that would be the key difference. So just looking at either b3 right now or f7. Or I could also consider maybe b4 as well, just for a single disc flip break. So interestingly, if I were to break to the top first and just have a few moves in exchange on this left and top diagonally, he would establish some disc to the top potentially and therefore poison his moves to the right. And of course, conversely, the converse is true. If I were to play to the left, to the bottom right actually, I would actually exchange some moves with him, maybe to the right hand side, or he would just play a simple, straightforward move to d2. So weighing the sequence between both sides, I think playing towards my longer side seems to be slightly more advantageous in terms of the sequence that I can play. And if he plays to the short side, he would then have fewer options. He wouldn't really have many more options to play around with that shape. He would have more options if he were to play towards the right. So let me go to the right hand side first and just see whether I can exchange some moves with him. So the top pick for him would probably mean g6 over here. g6 followed by me jumping right into the center, and then he would have a quiet move over here potentially. Okay, so he didn't go for that. That was surprising. So he does go for d2, more of a rotational basis. So I'll just go for that pocket e7. And if he goes for the quiet move to f8, I would have that exchange. So he doesn't. So he elects to go for more of a rotational basis, exchanging tempo, just rotating in a clockwise manner. So if he goes to f3 next, I would probably have c7 in response. That would cut away the move that he has to g3, so he would probably have to play g4 instead. Or he could just jump right into d8 to get that access to d7, d8, e8, and followed by that access back to g3. That is also an option for him. Okay, so he's played to g3 first, almost like an advanced move to capture the tempo first, so that's fair. I'll just respond with g4, capturing back f4 disc so that I can retain that access back to c7. So it's likely that he goes maybe with f3, exchange for c7, and then maybe he goes for h4. Okay, let's go with c7 then. So instead of playing h4 and establishing this h4 disc that is irremovable and poisoning his future d8, I would imagine that maybe if he plays d8 and feed off e8 and then follow with h4 might be better. Okay, so opponent does take the h4 move, probably looking to exchange some tempo. Let's see, if I were to go to b6 with a straightforward tempo exchange, he might go for either one of h5 or h6. Alternatively, I could actually just jump into h3 right now to feed off that edge. If he were to go with h6, I would have to follow through to the top, so that's not too great. I would prefer to actually let him play out the right hand side first, establish some pockets of spaces for me to play to, and then I would attack it rather than the other way around. So I shouldn't be interfering with his approach to the right hand side at this point in time. So let me just go to a simple quick move to b6. So he's played h6, a straightforward approach, but also a useful one, I guess. So let me just jump right into h5 first, establishing a disc along this mini diagonal for fear of future mid-game swindles if I were to follow through. So just playing h5, anticipating g6 if I were to play next to b5, and if he goes maybe f8, I would still have some access to e8. Okay, so he didn't play that, so that's fine. Since he didn't play that, I'll just play this, feed off the unbalanced edge, and then go for the simple, straightforward b5. Okay, so after he's established this edge, the next weak point for me will be here, so let me just cover that up quickly. Okay, opponent has played a quiet move against the longest row over here, so that's a fair move to play. I'll just feed off the unbalanced edge to him and go for the poison. If he doesn't and instead chooses to go to b4, I would have a quiet a4 and potentially consecutive tempo to a3. So if he just play a4 first, I'll take a3, he'll jump in, I'll take the quiet edge to b3. That is one potential sequence as well. Yep. Okay. Or alternatively, I could actually jump in right now. But probably not great if he takes this edge and I go in. He can take consecutive tempo by playing a2 and then followed by a3. Not too great. So let me go for this move over here to a3, threatening to form a balance edge, a solid balance edge actually. Okay, opponent has indeed taken b4. So whether I should take this balance edge or I should feed off the unbalanced edge first and take it, that is the question right now. If I were to take the balance edge, it almost means like I'm challenging him to play probably g6 or e8. Either one, I should be able to close off the moves. But if I were to form an unbalanced edge for him first and then go with that approach, it might be slightly safer. So let's go with that unbalanced edge feed first. He has to take it. If not, he will lose the tempo. So after he takes it, this would still remain a quiet move for me. I'll go with that, and if he does a full sweep, I could probably play a floating X square over here. Okay, so he does take that. I'll take the quiet edge to the left. Okay, so surprisingly, he chose to take e8. So I guess I'll be going with the floating X square either way, because if I were to play it to g6, I would also flip one more disc to c6 that gives him one more move to b7. So that's what I want to avoid doing. So I'll go with the g7 floating X square, anticipating him to jump in here, and I'll feed the unbalanced edge. It's basically a double unbalanced edge, so he has no choice but to take the corner, and I'll grab the wedge, and in exchange I'll grab one corner as well. So hopefully no surprises here. So just under 3.5 minutes for him on the clock. Does seem like he is short of time. Okay, he's going for the c square move. So I'll just grab the corner that he's feed me. He's probably gonna go for b7 x square, which is a fair sequence to actually play a potential parity maneuver to counter the current situation. So I'll play a quick quiet move to c2, basically looking for a cross maneuver. So quiet move on the right while retaining the move to the left cross. So that would still remain, having some moves for me as well. So that's fine. That compensates for one another. Okay, so right now he's played this move. So he's basically looking to control this mini diagonal, which is a fair strategy to try to control. I'll just jump into the center, establish some discs within that diagonal, and at the same time the vertical end of it. Okay, so he's taken the edge. I'll just take a quick c square move while retaining access to the x square over here. So he will probably jump right into the corner or the pocket over here. So he is running a little short on time, so let's see how that goes. Okay, he does go for that X square pocket. So right now I'll just sweep towards the right hand side while controlling this mini diagonal. So there isn't any concern of him taking a diagonal control because I still have one more move to cut back into this disc. So right now he's done that. I'll cut back to try to get back the excess. So if he jumps in right now, I'll grab the corner. You have to play here, and then I'll go in here for parity. Does that make sense? Let me see. Okay, actually there might be more disc on this end if I were to play this. So I have 7.5 minutes, lots of time to count. Let's do some count. So this would be 26. He would take the corner. 24. I'll take this move consecutive 2 moves. So that's 29, 33, 36, 41 plus 7. No. 41 plus 5. 46. Okay, and if I were to take a corner, that would be 27. He would respond into the pocket. 26, 31, 35, 35. Corner. 34 plus 5, 39, minus 1, 38, 45. So this one is slightly more, I guess. Let's go with this move. Hopefully no surprises there. Okay, so 47, so slightly more. So good game. Thanks for the game, Ian. So that is round 3. Okay, so this is the final round, round 4 of the 32nd Singapore Open, up against the leader, Feetlord, who has, I think, 3 wins, straight wins. So me playing as black, I have 2.5 due to a surprise draw earlier in round 2. So right now, this would be a critical match for me to actually win the Open. If I definitely need a win. I can't have a draw. So let's see. Probably go with the usual cow opening just for the safe side. If he's playing chimney, I'll play a slight variation instead of the usual d7. Let's go for d4. Okay, let's play to the side. This is a usual book sequence, so we'll just play moves and exchange tempo between the bottom left and the top right over here. So given the speed of how he's responding, it does look like he's pretty much well prepared for this opening. So let's see. Right now he has a move following after this to either f3 or d4, both of which are good moves. So it's becoming a little difficult, but I'll take a regrouping move to the bottom at d7 and perhaps wait for him. Okay, so since he's played to the right at f3, I'll play to the bottom on the tail end of this continuous row and wait for him to maybe commit to d4. If he goes to d4, then c4, and then d2 would be a weak point, perhaps. Or potentially I could go to g5 and try to regroup back. That is another option. So let's go with g5 as a point move over here. Alternatively, I could go to g6 as well, anticipating maybe a crossover to f8. So the top move to d2 is less urgent at this point in time as compared to resolving the right. So probably the right looks to take a higher priority. So the choice should be between g5 and g6. Let's go with g5 being a point move to regroup over here. So there is a high chance that he might maybe play something like h6 to actually prevent that regrouping, of which I could follow with g6 to slot into the pocket space. Or if he ignores that approach and goes to f8, I would then probably consider either one of e7 or g6. That should be a standard response there. I don't think he's going to go to e7 because e7 basically just gives me a very straightforward g6 response to control this mini diagonal and at the same time still maintaining somewhat of a centralized shape. So for him, I guess the top picks would be h6 and f8 over here. I don't see any other option for him. I would personally prefer if he played h6, perhaps. If he plays f8, it might be a little bit troublesome to deal with. But I guess I would regroup to e7 following f8. That is probably the more conservative approach. Okay, so that's surprising. He chose to play to e7, which is a bit strange. So we'll just go for the quick cut back to g6. So bearing in mind that I still have control of this mini centralizing axis, if you will, or this mini diagonal. So he will probably have to work his way around that. Okay, so this is a very interesting, nice flip or chip move to the side by him without actually giving too many moves. At the same time, he's created a somewhat awkward shape for me to actually break out of. So this is a very interesting move by Feetlord. Let's see. Probably the natural response would be to just go to b5 and then see what he's probably aiming for. b5, he'll probably follow with a5, after which I wouldn't have access over here to b6, and he still has access to b6. And that would probably be a slight problem for me. Alternatively, I could respond to either one of these to the edges. It's probably fine as well. Probably let's play b5 and just see, how the sequence would play out. It's a high chance that you would follow up with a5 and try to go for consecutive tempo, which is a fair thing to do given that I cannot take d2 to flip back the d7 disc because right now my d2 is badly poisoned by the earlier g5 move that I played, which he didn't commit to remove. So right now, I think things are not looking too great for me at the moment. Okay, so he does play that a5, which is a fair move to play. If he does go for b6, I can respond with a6 to feed him the unbalanced edge. But at the same time, I need to find a move right now. Another option would be to play g3 and remove that d7 disc, d6 disc that is actually providing him access for that consecutive tempo maneuver. So that is one option. Okay, let's go with a simple prevention maneuver, just removing or evaporating that move. So I think a standard sequence for him to actually respond to, is to take h3, form that plane to the top, try to drag me to the top to respond. So he would have more moves over there. On tail end of this long row of 6 discs, I could actually just jump right in over here. Or I could just cut into the center, try to gain consecutive tempo. Probably go for b3 since it doesn't obstruct my future f2. And at the same time, it establishes this disc to d3. So if he does play to g4, I would still have a nice h4 to feed off the unbalanced edge. So he doesn't respond there, so it's still fine for me. So I'll play this point disc to f2, which will then point over to my target square at b6. So if he does remove that, I can still play one more point move, so that's fine. So he responds by playing that squeeze in. So I would also be playing one squeeze move of my own since these two top squares somewhat form like a mid-game pair. So if he plays one of them, I can play the other. If he plays this one, I might just go for the consecutive tempo move across to a6. So having played b6 without him having a direct access to a6, I am essentially just trying to aim for 2 consecutive tempo. Just take the quiet move over there, which is a fair maneuver. So let me just go for that consecutive tempo right now. Or should I actually leave it and just play it over here? Let's see. If I were to leave it, he wouldn't be playing that. maneuver, but I might risk losing this key disc, so I'll just play it right now. Just ensure that I can still play it, play it while I still can, and then maintain that few discs along this mini diagonal, which would be critical in terms of the safe squares that are remaining, the top and also to the bottom somewhat as well. So I think Feet Lord is playing a great game right now. It's difficult to actually find opportunities to bounce off. Think F8 might be a top option for him potentially, or just simply playing to the edge. Alternatively, you could jump into the center, but this would give me a quiet move to A3. So let's see. Okay, so he does take D2 to the top. Okay, so now the first instinct is to actually jump into the pocket, but if I don't, and I play to a move to the bottom, if he takes it, I'll still be able to take this quiet move over here, which is still a fair sequence to play. If I were to take this, he would be able to take two consecutive moves to play the C square and also the X square in terms of gaining tempo. So that is a slight concern at this point in time. So I'll just go for the center cut. So now F8 is still a bit problematic. Right now, just trying to occupy the center and trying to wait for some of his mistakes. Maybe some weak points when he's grabbing one or two of the edges. Okay, so he does play F8, so probably one potential option is to just respond with E8 to feed off the unbalanced edge, or to ignore that approach and play to the top. So I think feeding off the unbalanced edge is more critical at this point in time. He might take the unbalanced edge to the right first, which is a fairly clean pair, unbalanced edge. So I think it's fine for him. The game looks fairly close, so I guess it will be decided by one or two of the crucial mid or end game maneuvers. Okay, so he doesn't commit to take that move, and instead goes for the top F1, which in the future he can establish access to E1 to go for consecutive tempo. So that's a fair sequence by him. So the general rule of thumb is that when you're approaching an edge, and if your opponent doesn't take the edge, you should take it in terms of tempo. But right now, if I do take it, there is a danger of being stoned by the X square, of which he would be able to continue with D8 to attack this unbalanced edge. So on the flip side, I can play the X square, but black-white, that might be a slight concern. So now thinking of moves to the top. So this is a very good move by Feet Lord. Finding it difficult to find a good response to it. Let's play a simple D1, one square gap, and at the same time he might play a B square swindle by playing to the A square over here, of which I would definitely have to respond with B1 for fear of losing tempo. So I think right now white might be slightly ahead. It's hard to say, but yeah. White does have the advantage of natural parity. Okay, so white does take C1, so I have to respond for fear of loss of tempo. He might choose to feed it off and then make a clean C square move. Or alternatively, he could actually just go for that unbalanced edge to the right. So now it seems like the game situation is getting very bad for me. Hopefully I can find something. So the pressure of playing as black is that usually in the end game, if you don't have natural parity, it's hard to find the winning sequence. If you do, it's probably less pressurizing for yourself. Okay, so he takes the unbalanced edge. Okay, so one concern about taking this unbalanced edge is that he would form this diagonal control, which is going to be tough for me to break through. Even if I do break through, I wouldn't capture the corner because that would be a 3-disc empty gap. So alternatively, I could feed the edge over here, control this mini diagonal across. So he doesn't have that regrouping C square. Black, white, black. Followed by white, black, or white, black, white, black, white. Okay, let's go with that. So the purpose of H5 is to cut off the F3 disc basically, which gave him critical access to the X square over here to B7. So right now, after I've removed it, at the same time remove his access down the line to H7, I would be able to do like maybe a wedge. So white, black, and basically for white to establish back that access to H7, he would have to play maybe C8, which would actually carve out a 3-disc region for me to actually overcome parity in the future. So that could be an advantage for me, but not too sure if that would work out successfully because white, black, white, white does have the threat of actually playing a diagonal control in the future. So that is going to be a huge problem for me in the future. So let's see. This might have been a mistake, but alternatively white, and then if I go for the X square first, it might be more probable for me to protect the excess over here. So, and at the same time, he cannot play C8. Let's go with B7 and take it as a gamble. If he plays the D8, establishes that excess, I would jump in and wedge in between. There might be an opportunity, but I think I still lose parity and maybe therefore the game as well. So this is going to be a tough one. Way too many options for him to close off the game with parity, so just under 5 minutes for both players. Okay, so he just jumps in, which is fair. I'll go for the wedge, and then if I were him, I would probably take the X square over here to give up corner so that he can take back the final cut back on the main diagonal, on this main diagonal. So let's see how the endgame progresses. It is a bit challenging to see the endgame from here for both sides, I guess. So I'll just follow, but I think even though I don't have parity, it's a relatively easier endgame for me to just simply follow parity or non-parity. Um, yeah, so I think the decision making is actually up to him right now for the overall sequence. Without parity, I think it's difficult to actually win the game. Right now, if he plays the X square, I would be forced to take it. He'll jump in, I'll have to sweep down, and if he feeds off this, I'll grab it and he takes the parity move maneuver. And it's probably over for me, I think. Probably lose by somewhere between 6 to 8 discs, maybe more. Okay, so he does play that move, which is within expectations. Instead of committing it all too immediately to H1, and probably a straightforward loss for me, maybe I could complicate things by playing to A2, A2, A8, A7. At least I can sweep back the main diagonal. It's probably not as bad as allowing him to sweep back the main diagonal. That could be a difference. And at the same time, he cannot feed me this balance edge because if he wanted parity, he would have to sweep another edge across. So right now, this C square is very important for me. Yeah, so black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, followed by the sweep down and black. So that is probably my best gamble at this point in time. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so definitely he has to take the corner. If he takes this, 34, 32, 34, 30, 32, 27, 30, 26, 28, 28, 24. There might be a chance that I probably win by 33 to 31 with that sequence. So, yeah, I think holding off and contesting for the main diagonal will be key in this game. So I think if he were to try to still hold on to that main diagonal, then that would mean that he has to play maybe something as extreme as h7, perhaps. But it wouldn't make sense if I would be able to sweep black, white, black, both moves, I guess. So this endgame looks extra difficult. So he's short of time, probably doing some counting over there. Let's see what he plays. Okay, he does play an extreme h7 as expected. He probably counted the other sequence to be losing and therefore decided to play this instead. Yeah, very brave move, perhaps. So I definitely have to respond in terms of tempo. Black, white, black. Did it make sense? Yeah, black, white, black, followed by white, black, white. And then probably the direct sweep across would benefit me. Black, white. No, I think the full sweep would be still more advantageous. So he's going to sweep down to the corner right now. Grab this. And then basically he loses the diagonal control. So even if black, white, white, black, white, black, I would still have the main diagonal. So thanks, Daniel, for the great game. And so I think with that, I managed to finish off the game. For the final score count, yes. Just say out the coordinates and we can report.